My name is Justin, and I'm 28 years old. The incident I'm about to tell you about happened last Christmas Eve in Vancouver, Canada. Even now, when I think about that night, my whole body trembles, and I feel like my heart stops. This story is real, although sometimes I can hardly believe I experienced such a thing. It all started with a simple invitation. My old friend Mike, whom I hadn't seen in years, called and invited me to a Christmas party in a cabin on the outskirts of the city. He said some old friends would be there, and we could relive old memories. Tired of being alone on Christmas Eve, I happily accepted. On December 24th, I took my car and headed towards the address Mike had given me. It was dark and snow was falling heavily. The mountain roads were winding and visibility was very low. After about 2 hours of driving, I reached a side road that seemed to lead to the cabin. As I drove down the narrow, snowy road, I had a strange feeling. Something didn't feel right. The tall pine trees on both sides of the road were like dark walls swallowing me. The sound of the wind through the branches was like the howl of wolves. Suddenly, my headlights fell on a sign that read, "Welcome to Bloody Christmas Camp." My heart sank. This name was different from what Mike had told me. I wanted to turn back, but the road was too narrow to turn around. I had to continue. After a few minutes, I finally saw the cabin. Contrary to my expectations, no lights were on, and there was no sound of music or laughter. There was only silence and darkness. I hesitantly got out of the car. The snow reached my knees and the cold chilled my bones. I went to the cabin door and knocked several times. There was no answer. I turned the handle, and the door opened with a loud creak. "Mike, is anyone here?" My voice echoed in the empty, dark cabin. There was no answer. With a trembling hand, I searched for the light switch and finally found it. When the lights came on, I gasped. The walls were covered with Christmas decorations, but not ordinary ones. Christmas balls were filled with a red liquid that looked like blood. Instead of cheerful colors, all the string lights were blood red, and on the wall, written in red paint, was, "Merry Christmas, next victim." Terrified, I turned back to the door, but it was locked. No matter how hard I tried, it wouldn't open. I heard laughter behind me. I turned and saw Mike standing there in a Santa Claus costume. But this Santa was different from what I knew. His eyes were red, and his teeth were sharp and pointed. "Welcome, Justin. We've been waiting for you. Tonight, you're our Christmas gift." Before I could move, several people emerged from the darkness and grabbed me. They all wore strange and scary masks. They took me to a room at the end of the hallway. When they opened the door, I saw something I will never forget. The room was full of torture devices. Chains hung from the ceiling, and various knives and saws were on the walls. In the corner of the room was a Christmas tree decorated with human body parts instead of ornaments. Mike came forward and said, "You know, Justin, we're a special group. Every year we choose someone to keep the spirit of Christmas alive. This year, you've been chosen." I begged, cried, tried to escape, but it was useless. They tied me to the torture bed, and Mike picked up a knife. "Let's start with your fingers. I'm sure your screams will be as beautiful as Christmas music." I felt terrible pain and screamed. Their laughter mixed with my screams. I don't know how long it lasted, but every moment felt like a century. Pain, blood, and terror had consumed my entire being. Amidst all that pain and horror, suddenly a loud sound was heard from outside. It sounded like someone was knocking. Mike and the others looked at each other. One of them said, "No one was supposed to come." "Who is it?" Mike quickly left the room. A few moments later, there was the sound of shouting and struggle. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I didn't know what had happened. Had I been saved, or had the situation gotten worse? After a few minutes that felt like hours, the door opened. Seeing who entered, tears welled up in my eyes. It was my father. He looked at me with concern and said, "Justin, my son, thank God you're alive." Behind him, several police officers entered. They quickly untied me from the bed and gave me a blanket. One of the officers explained, "You were lucky, son. When your father saw you hadn't come home, he got worried and led us here with your phone tracker." Mike and the rest of the group members were arrested. Later, I found out that they were a secret cult that sacrificed someone every Christmas Eve. They believed that by doing this, they would gain supernatural powers. I was taken to the hospital and was under treatment for weeks. My physical wounds healed, but my emotional scars are still with me. Every night I have nightmares and hear their terrifying laughter.
If you enjoyed it so far, please hit the subscribe button if you liked the video.
Whenever I see Christmas decorations, I'm reminded of that horrific night. Now, a year has passed since that incident. I'm still recovering and trying to resume my normal life. But whenever someone asks me if I have plans for Christmas, I can only shake my head and say, no, I prefer to stay home. This is my true story, a story that shows sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones hiding under the bed or in the closet. Sometimes they appear in the guise of old friends with a smile on their face. So be careful. The next invitation you accept might be the last one of your life.